11 forwards, 5 defensemen, and 6 penalties later, and the Nashville Predators lose to the Minnesota Wild. Why can't the Nashville Predators win winnable games?
You're Locked On Predators, your daily podcast on the Nashville Predators, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy New Year, everyone. Welcome to the Locked On Predators podcast. Thanks so much for making us your first listen of the day and maybe of the new year. We are, of course, your Monday through Friday Nashville Predators podcast. We're a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We want to kick off this New Year's game recap episode, of course, shouting out our Locked On Predators insiders and our everydayers. And of course, we want to welcome any first-time listeners into the show. We appreciate your support. We love walking through this wild Nashville Predators season with you all. I'm Ann Kimmel. I am a writer and co-host with Penalty Box Radio. And my friends, you know I have a partner in crime.
You do. I'm Emma Lingen, and I'm the Predators site editor and reporter for the Hockey News.
Emma, I thought maybe we would kick off the new year with like a woo, Predators win game recap, but yet here we are. Gotta talk about yet another defeat snatched from the jaws of victory by the Nashville Predators. They, of course, fell last night to the Minnesota Wild by a score of 5-3. Of course, on today's show, we're going to recap the game with our one word, and we're going to talk about a couple of very pivotal moments in that game and wrestle with the existential question of why can't the Nashville Predators win winnable games? It's making us crazy here, y'all. Do want to just give a real quick pivot away from hockey and give a shout out to my Nittany Lions. Y'all, last night it was actually a really great sports night, except for the outcome, Emma, because for Christmas I got my husband a big screen TV. So now in his man cave, he has 2 big screen TVs stacked on top of each other. So we had the Penn State game on the top and the Nashville Predators game on the bottom. And I thought, this is how I was meant to live. So we got one win.
Yeah. Well, and I like, for those of you watching on YouTube, you can see Anne is decked out for the occasion. So I love it. I love it.
Yeah. Wearing my Saquon Barkley jersey because, you know, Penn State moving on. But we do have to talk about a team that probably not moving on when it comes to the playoffs, y'all. That's a podcast for another day, and we're going to tackle that topic soon. Nashville Predators, what in the ever-loving flagnog, Emma? Again, this is a game the Nashville Predators could have won, and they just find ways not to. They lost last night to the Minnesota Wild 5-3. There's a lot we want to unpack about this game. But of course, we always kick off our game recaps with one word to describe the game. So, Emma, if you had to describe this 5-3 game in one word or more, our show, our rules, how would you describe what unfolded last night in Minnesota?
I'm going to go 2 words.
Okay.
And special teams.
Oh, girl.
That was the difference maker in this one for the Nashville Predators. As you mentioned, this team keeps finding new ways to lose games, and it is baffling. But this particular edition of How the Predators Lost brought to you by special teams, because they're actually 5-on-5, if you want to look for positives. 5-on-5, this team looked very good, actually. They were generating a lot of chances. They generated plenty of offense. And then we get to special teams. 0 for 1 on the power play. 3 for 6 on the penalty kill. That top-ranked penalty kill. Where did it go? Because, you know, now, of course, they're without Cole Smith, who is one of their top penalty killers. He's on IR. Jeremy Lauzon, we're going to get to. He left the game early against Minnesota. Alex Carrier, obviously, now shipped off to Montreal. So that top-ranked power play is really taking some, or penalty kill, rather, is really taking some hits. And so, yeah, if you want to look at, like you said, this is a winnable game.
Again.
If the Predators had been on their game for special teams, this we'd be having a different conversation right now. But it was just really a really poor performance all around on special teams.
I so wish we were having a different conversation, but it feels like we're having the same conversation over and over again about this Nashville Predators team. My one word is also not one word. Our show, our rules. And it is a throwback to American Idol, William Hung's She Bangs. Not a great song. I mean, it's a great song when Ricky Martin sings it. It was not a great audition. Didn't win the ultimate prize, but you kind of had to admire like his positivity, and he took this like kind of what could have been an embarrassing moment, turned it into something positive. Just a little side note, I did a little digging. He's worth $500,000 now. Like he's like a motivational speaker, professional poker player. He released an album. Like, so talk about taking something little and turning it into something. William Hung did that, but this is not a song I would ever buy. Like you will not, I will not pay for that on Apple Music. And that's how I felt this game was. Like Nashville goes up against another top team in the Central Division. And at times it was like plucky and inspiring. But in the end, they don't win any prize. And this is not a game I want to listen, I want to watch again. And yet it feels like a game we have seen on repeat because we are watching a Nashville Predators team that could be winning games, finding ways to lose them. We always, of course, ask our insiders for their one word. Corey's one word is goodbye, as in you are the weakest link. Goodbye. There are just too many weakest links on the team for them to sustain winning. Chris's one word is confounded. This team is certainly playing better as a whole than they were, but it doesn't seem to be enough on most nights. Forsberg's inability to score is the most confounding thing of all. Confounding is a great word, and I think Chris has a good point. The team is playing better. The players, like we were so worried about Stamkos and Marchessault getting up to speed, getting Brady Shea to understand the defensive system. We're seeing that happen. And yet, they still are finding ways to lose games. I do want to give a shout out to Henry, our insider. His one word, go Preds. He's keeping the negativity in 2024. If only everyone would get on that bandwagon, Henry.
Thank you, Henry.
We appreciate it. Like you said, there were some positives in this game. Jonathan Marchessault got on the score sheet again. In his last 10 games, he has 9 goals and 14 points. Again, we talked about Steven Stamkos is getting up to speed in his last 10 games, 4 goals, 10 points. We saw Ryan O'Reilly score a goal. The Predators had 46 shots on goal. They're shooting the puck. We're getting some of these players are hot right now. I would say Marchessault is on a heater. But the negatives, Emma, you talked about it. Special teams, they gave up 3 power play goals. And you said something in your one word that I think we need to just highlight because people tend to poop about Cole Smith. Cole Smith is a hot button player. Like, why do we have Cole Smith in this lineup? This is where you see why you have Cole Smith in the lineup. Because when you look at that penalty kill, like you said, you don't have Cole Smith anymore. Alexander Carrier, shot blocking machine on the penalty kill, no longer here. Jeremy Lauzon left the game. Zach Laroo has been on the penalty kill at times. He was out of the game. Oh, we're going to get to that. We're going to get to that. When you have the top when you have the top penalty kill, and you have a mediocre power play and you give them 3 power play goals, you're doing something wrong, Nashville. You're doing something wrong.
Yeah. And as we talked about on yesterday's show, Minnesota's power play, really not much to write home about, but you wouldn't know it.
Yeah.
You wouldn't know it after watching that game. But yeah, it's kind of like a different kind of loss, but similar to Winnipeg, play stupid games, you win stupid prizes. Yeah. And that's exactly what happened here because you can't, against Winnipeg had the top power play in the league. So okay, fair. But Minnesota and I would like to point out that Minnesota was without scoring machine Kirill Kaprizov. He was out. So it's like, if ever there was a chance for this Predators team to win a game against the second best team in the Central in the Minnesota Wild, this was it. And they blew it. They blew it.
They're not taking advantage of big picture opportunities and small moment opportunities. We're going to talk about that coming up. We're also going to talk about that Zachary Laroo match penalty call. We're going to talk about Justus Ananen's performance in net and what the loss of Jeremy Lauzon could mean for the Nashville Predators if he is out long term. The NFL playoffs are almost here, but friends, it is not too late to get in on the regular season action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can finish the season strong with $250 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. FanDuel has so many ways for you to pick up that W. Not only can you bet on who will win the game, but FanDuel also has bets for which players will score a touchdown, how many points each team will score, and so much more. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your chance at $250 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, Emma, we got to talk about it. There was much talk about it on social media during the game, but Zachary Laroo in the second period received a match penalty. This was after he engaged in his first NHL fight. Just turn it into a man before our eyes. But then in the second period, called for a slew foot, a match penalty. First thing I want to say is you never want to see somebody get injured, and you hated to see Jared Spurgeon go off. Didn't look like he was putting any weight on that leg. So, don't want to see that. Here is what I want to say about this. By definition, you could call that a slew foot. Having covered a team with PK Subban, who was on the roster,
the slew foot king.
Nashville Predators fans are familiar with what a slew foot looks like. So we know one when we see one. Bless. I love PK Subban, but let's just say what is. So, the reality is that intent absolutely does not matter when you are making this call. A slew foot, it is an action, and that action occurred. And so even when you slow it down, you can kind of see where they have to call it. And I don't have any problem with the call. Hate to see it. Again, hate to see Spurgeon injured. And intent doesn't matter when you are making that call. It's the definition of the penalty, and this fit the definition. And so no argument with the call. Here is my beef. Intent does not matter in the call, but you are lame and you are low-hanging fruit pickers if you want intent to be the topic of your discourse. And there was so much of that on social media last night from both sides of this game coverage. Before he had even unlaced his skates, a Minnesota reporter had an article out about Zachary Laroo and the way that he plays. And this is so typical, this is exactly what you knew you were going to get from him after his history. And I think, two things can be true at the same time. It's 100% the right call. And I hate to say it because, you hate to see somebody go out, but that was the right call. But second of all, stop turning it into a conversation where you are just like, hey, I can get clicks out of what I'm typing and what I'm publishing. But I guess you can do that. You can do that. It's just, I find it low-hanging fruit and just a little bit, I can't even think of the right word, but annoying AF. The discourse around it. That just, how did you feel about the call? What is your takeaway? How do you see this conversation being productive about Zachary Laroo in this call?
Well, I don't see it being productive, but
Right, did we?
no, I mean, I agree with you that I think it was definitely the right call.
Mhm.
At the end of the day, there was so much back and forth on social media from, like you said, from both sides
Both
of the
sides.
argument about the intent. And the reality is the intent does not matter. Like, let's
Mhm.
call a spade a spade. It was a slew foot. I mean, from my personal point of view, it appeared that he, it started as what would have been a clean hit. Laroo had a lot of momentum. He and Spurgeon
Mhm.
were both chasing the puck. He had a lot of momentum behind him. He is coming off that first fight, which you knew he had just been waiting for.
Oh, gosh.
He was so ready for that. But there's a lot of momentum going into it. He's a young player. It looks like he lost a little bit of control. His
Mhm.
legs swept, and the sticks swept Spurgeon's legs out from under him, which by definition is a slew foot.
Mhm.
So intentional or not, who freaking cares? It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And there's so much. I mean, so point is, it was absolutely the right call. Hate to say it, but it was.
Yep.
It Just because it wasn't intentional doesn't mean it wasn't a slew foot, because it was.
Mhm.
I think that he's probably going to have a suspension coming for it. I think, though, like you said, all of this stuff about his history in the queue and all of his suspensions and things like that, all true. It's all there. Like, it all happened. And, we don't need to pretend like it didn't.
Mhm.
But in this case, I think, like you said, low hanging fruit. And I just have to point out, and this is not new. We've said this before. This is not just coming up now because of this action. Since he has come up to the NHL, Zachary Laroo has been so impressive to me in terms of his maturity, his
Mhm.
poise, his clear readiness to play at this level. We weren't seeing the antics. We weren't seeing him trying to do too much. We weren't, it was a little bit of when he got called up, it was like, what's going to happen? And
Yeah.
in how many games now? He's been so, like, I think that he's just been very impressive in terms of his maturity and his ability to play the game the right way.
Mhm.
So things like this happen. And let's just say it happened to, I don't know, like Philip Forsberg. Let's say it was
Mhm.
Philip Forsberg. No one would be, maybe not no one, but like most people would not be
Right.
like, he intended to hurt him. That wasn't just because Phil doesn't have a history of these kinds of things. And so people are just like, I think people would be more willing to look at it the way I just said it, which is like, yeah, it was bad.
Yep.
Can't do that. But I think it was an accident. Intent doesn't matter, though. It's still the right call.
Right.
We move on. But people just start digging up all of this information about Laroo's past. And it's like, yes, it's there, but it I just don't see how the argument is productive. I was seeing so many people saying, oh, he wanted to inflict pain on I'm like, y'all are really overestimating
Yeah.
like Zach Laroo's personal rage. Like I don't think he cares that
It's so
much.
true. That is so true.
I'm like, no one, again, like from someone who spent a lot of time around the guy, like he is not an angry person
He
in
loves
general.
Moana too, y'all. He
He's
loves
like,
Moana too.
the people who are saying he wanted to cause that carnage, I'm like, I don't think so.
He
Like,
really didn't.
again, people are taking two separate arguments and trying to
Mhm.
meld them into one, and that's not a productive thing to do here.
Yeah.
It was a slew foot. That was the right call. You can't do that. And
Mhm.
hopefully he learns from this. But so many people are already writing him off and not giving him an opportunity to learn from this because they're like, well, that's what
Same
happens.
old Zach Laroo.
Yeah, when you get a
It's
dirty
really
player.
not. It's
No,
not.
no.
Yeah.
And so, like, again, I look at, when we look at young players who have maybe kind of a history of these kinds of things and, carrying a reputation with them through different levels of hockey, I think that, I look at Matt Rempe with the New York Rangers.
Yeah.
He's currently serving an 8-game suspension for his hit on Miro Heiskanen with the Dallas Stars. Now, this kid, I think, has had more suspensions. Like, he's been suspended like more games than he's played in the NHL, like something wild like that. And that, to me, and that is a pattern that we've seen at the NHL level that keeps happening. He's been suspended multiple times. He keeps getting these, for bad hits. And to me, people are trying to make the Matt Rempe argument about Zach Laroo. And I'm like, he absolutely had that reputation in the Q and to an extent in the AHL. But since he has come up to the NHL, he has been a model citizen, really. And so again, I'm not saying any of that to excuse the play. It was a bad play, can't happen. He deserved the call. He did. But people keep trying to bring the intent argument into it when at the end of the day, it really doesn't matter. And it's not fair to really assume here.
And I think there are two things that make this situation tricky. One is what Zachary Laroo did in the queue is going to follow him because those are the facts. That's his history. And, you and I have both talked with him about that. He knows it. Like, this is not a kid who is not unaware that he dug himself a hole. He is not unaware of what the expectations are from this organization because they are investing in him. He is very aware, and the organization is very clear with what he can and cannot do. And he has been very respectful of that line. You hate to say it, but his reputation, there are going to be very few articles written about Zach Laroo that don't include this because it's sensational. It's sensational that he did dumbass things.
Yeah.
In the queue, he did dumbass things. But it is interesting to me, and that's just part of it. That's part of being young and dumb, is that sometimes you're going to make choices that are going to follow you. Right or wrong, that's just how life works, and it sucks. But to immediately go back to the queue and then go, see, he's doing the exact same thing for this specific play, that's a low-hanging fruit. And then to see people say, well, that's how Zach Laroo plays, and you can be okay with it. That's actually not how Zach Laroo has played in the NHL at all.
No.
And I don't think you have to be okay with that. And I don't think Zach Laroo is okay with what happened. I don't think he's like, oh, well, you know what I'm saying? Like, it just people need to navigate this with some wisdom. And again, not excusing what he did in the past, understand why people have a perception of him, but also look at what the reality of his time in the NHL has been. And just, stop being sensational. Like, we don't need the National Enquirer in hockey. Hockey has enough wild stories all on its own.
Yes. I think, like you said, we're not trying to ignore his past or pretend that it didn't happen. Yeah, it happened.
It did.
But again, this is not a Matt Rempe situation. This stuff has not followed him into the NHL at a consistent level. He's been playing how many, 20 some odd games at the NHL level?
To like 30 some maybe.
Is he? Okay.
Let me
Either
see.
way.
Yeah. He's been around a while.
A significant sample size at this point. And this is the first instance that we've seen. Again, doesn't excuse it, doesn't make it okay, doesn't make you think like, just let him off with a warning on this one. No, he deserves the punishment that he gets for it because it was a bad play.
Yes.
But again, the constant like you said, you can, you have to know that this is what you're getting with Zach Laroo, and it's okay. Like, you can be okay with it. It's like, no, I
No,
think it's,
I don't think that's what we're getting with Zach Laroo. And I also wouldn't be okay with it.
and I mean, being aware of it and just being realistic and acknowledging that it exists doesn't mean that you have to be okay with it. It just
Right.
means that, like, this is, yes, I mean, we've said this before ourselves. When you bring this player into the fold, you are taking a calculated risk because
Mhm.
he is the type of player that's a very, like, high risk, high reward kind of guy. And I am confident that, like, this kid, I think it was last summer, like, spent time living with assistant GM Scott Nickel. Like, they have invested so much in this
Yes.
kid and in making sure that he is ready and that he's not going to do the dumbass things when he gets
Mhm.
to the NHL. Now, again, things happen. And again, if we were talking about Philip Forsberg or Luke Evangelista, if Luke
Luke
Evangelista did
Evangelista.
this, if he did this, people would be like, "Ah, you hate to see it." But,
Yep.
like, it
It
happens.
is. Yeah. It is a slew
Yeah.
foot. Now we got to,
Yeah. Like, literally what we're saying right now.
right.
Like, people would say that if it was Evangelista. But since it's Laroo and he has this past, people are just so ready to bring out their torches and pitchforks that it's just like, why? Like, why do you have so much rage and anger about this? Who cares? I mean, the end result is what matters. Who cares if it was intentional? I mean,
Mhm.
it wasn't, but who cares if it was? It doesn't matter. Like, the
Yeah.
outcome is the same. It was a bad call. He deserves the penalty. He deserves the suspension he's likely going to get. And, we use this as a learning experience going forward.
Yeah. And again, obviously they're a Central Division rival, but do hope that Jared Spurgeon's okay. You hate to see it.
Yeah.
You hate to see it I mean, there's maybe one or two players in my invisible backpack of hockey grudges where I would sleep fine at night, but you do hate to see it. And, hope that, there's not any sort of long-term thing, but it was alarming seeing him go off the ice. That was
Yeah.
that was tough.
Yeah.
Coming up, do want to talk about a couple of other lineup issues the Nashville Predators will face, and then Emma and I are going to dive into the existential question of why, in the ever-loving Flagnog, this team cannot win winnable games. Today's episode is brought to you by our great friends at Gametime. I love going to live events, whether it is sports, music, theater, or comedy. One of my favorite memories from last year was attending Barry Manilow with my son. Friends, not going to lie, the energy and excitement off the charts. It was amazing. If you love live events, you're going to love Gametime. Gametime has now made it even easier to get tickets for your favorite events with their new feature, Gametime Picks. This feature is going to filter out the fluff and it's going to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you're not going to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. With Gametime Picks, you can find amazing deals and you can see the view from your seat before you buy. The super deals on Gametime are particularly impressive. They offer great seats at unbeatable prices. Plus, the app's all-in pricing shows the total cost up front with no surprise fees at checkout. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use our code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code Locked On NHL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime. So, Emma, we talked about it in the open 11 forwards, 5 defensemen in this game. Jeremy Lauzon left the game and did not return. I believe they said it was a lower body injury. Add to that the fact that Adam Wilsby was out of the lineup. We saw Justin Barron slot in. Wilsby, it's not thought to be serious. I believe he is day to day. A little concerning not to see Jeremy Lauzon out there for a couple of reasons. Number one, they need him on on defense. Of course, they need him on the penalty kill. Also, honestly, there's a part of me that was wondering if maybe he is going to be or has been a player in conversation to be traded. So the Lazan situation we'll monitor and let you know when we get an update on maybe sort of a long-term, whether it's a long-term injury, whether it's a short-term injury. The Predators don't play again until this weekend. They play Friday and Saturday. They have back-to-back. So we'll see if this is something where maybe a couple days we'll get him back in the lineup. But that's a significant loss on defense. And you hate to see Willsby not in the lineup because Willsby and Sir Blankenberg are cooking with grease or fire. Whatever the saying is, they're cooking with it.
Yeah, I think, with obviously you lost Laroo in the second period with the match penalty. Lausanne, it was not a clear moment or event that happened where you saw him leave. It was just kind of like, oh, he's not there. and he didn't come back. So not really sure what the issue is there with Willsby. Like you said, I would imagine it's not serious considering he played in the night before in Winnipeg. I think he played like 18 minutes, including like 9 shifts in the third period. So like he played the whole game against Winnipeg. So, it could be one of those things where you have the flexibility now that you have the extra defenseman and Justin Barron, he can slot in and it's not that big of a deal. So, I mean, it's hard either way, but yeah, when you lose a forward in Laroo and then you lose Lausanne on the back end, it's tough. I mean, this is a guy who had been playing on the top pairing with Roman Josi. He didn't against Minnesota because of the shuffle. Luke Shen played with Josi, and then Lausanne played on the third pairing with Barron. But again, poor Justin Barron has not had like a normal situation since he's been here. It's been
he's probably like, I don't even know what's going on.
He's played at 11-7, so he didn't really have a partner. And then finally he gets a game with a partner and his partner gets injured. And it's like, but I mean, credit to him. He's handled it well, I think. But yeah, it's you don't like to see it. Don't really know how serious any of these things are, but again, Jeremy Lausanne did not have a good game against Winnipeg. I mean, he took all those dang penalties, 3 penalties against Winnipeg. And it was another one where special teams proved to be the difference maker. But at the end of the day, he does kill penalties quite well. And they did not have him to do that in the game against Minnesota. That's how you get scored on 3 times on the power play.
Yep. Talking about the Winnipeg game, talking about Nashville, again, giving away this game in Minnesota. When you look at, especially, we could look back at the entire season, but I would say especially these 3 games since the Christmas break, where the Predators are playing better, where you see the new guys understanding the system. And yet this team cannot get wins. The game against St. Louis, winnable. The game against the Winnipeg Jets, winnable. The game last night against the Minnesota Wild, winnable. Emma, why can't this team close out winnable games? What is the issue here?
I would love to know. I do not have the answer. It's because, like you said, 3 straight losses coming out of the holiday break, but they're 3 very different types of losses. The loss against St. Louis, we saw them actually generating a lot of offense. I mean, they scored 4 goals and they still lost. And that was one where you're like, oh, the offense is actually working here. This is good. And we saw them, they fell behind by 2 goals early. They never could fully catch up, but they brought themselves within 1 4 different times in that game. So you saw the fight, but then, they stepped back and they let St. Louis jump on them again. That one, I mean, I don't think you can ever blame a loss solely on one thing, but I mean, UC Saros was a big part of that one. He did not look his best that night. And it was not a good game for him. He got pulled in the second period. Jussi Saarinen did very well when he came in relief, but I think that, getting an Unsaros-like performance early in that game really, really hurt them. And then you go to Winnipeg, which we talked about, very evenly matched. I mean, it was a goaltending duel between Saros was back on his BS there. Like he was like, yeah, okay, that what you saw in St. Louis, that was not me. This is me. And we saw it in Winnipeg. I mean, he was keeping them in this game. And of course, you had Connor Hellebuck on the other side who was keeping Winnipeg in the game. Neither team could score through almost 40 minutes. And it was just a defensive battle. And then finally, Winnipeg broke through with the goal at the end of the second period. But even then, I mean, that was a very nice goal by Dylan DeMello. And it
really was.
And I think even after that, you're like, okay, that wasn't, I mean, they're all bad. You never want to give up a goal. But it's like, that wasn't a bad goal to give up. It's like, okay,
that was a good goal for Winnipeg. That wasn't a bad goal on Nashville.
Right. So it's like, you think that, okay, this, there's still a chance here. Like they're, and then they got into all that penalty trouble in the third period and just completely came unraveled against, again, the top penalty or top power play in the NHL. Then you move on to Minnesota, and it's again a third different type of game. You have, they fall behind by 1 goal early, but then they're able to jump on and score 2 in a row and take the lead going into the first intermission. And you're like, okay, all right, this team who couldn't score against Winnipeg already has 2 goals in the first period. Like, all right, we're cooking here. And then you get an event like the Zach Laroo slew foot, and it's like a traumatic event that this team could not recover from. And it was like, it took the wind out of their sails. It rattled them because, again, for a slew foot, it's an automatic match penalty. So it's a 5-minute power play for the other team. But in this case, it was really a 3-minute power play. They played 2 minutes at 4-on-4 because Yakov Trenin was called 2 minutes for roughing because he kind of roughed up Laroo after the play. So they had 2 minutes at 4-on-4, then 3 minutes at 5-on-4 for Minnesota. Of course, they capitalize on that. They get the goal to tie it. And then what's interesting about that type of penalty is that it's, if the team scores on the power play, the power play isn't over. They still get the full 3 minutes. So they did not score again on that power play, but it was shortly after it expired, they were able to jump on them again. And then it was just like one of those wind out of your sails moments where you could just see the wheels falling off of this team. And there was a little bit, you saw some life. Ryan O'Reilly scored late in the second period where you think like, okay, all right, maybe there's a chance. And then, you just didn't see enough fight. So it's like, it's 3 different types of losses, but all very frustrating because they were all, as you said, very winnable games.
I go back to something that we heard Jonathan Marchessault say very early in the season, where this team just absolutely had nothing going. And he talked about, we're fragile. We are a fragile team. And I think they worked out of that in so many ways. I think we've seen them work out of that until, and I think there is still a line for this team, a mental line for this team where their confidence isn't there and they are not fragile until. And I think there was an until moment in that Winnipeg game. I think there was an until moment in this Minnesota game. And so I don't think it's a talent thing. I don't think this is a mediocre team. I think this is a team with enough talent to be winning these games. But I think there may still be sort of a confidence mental block thing with this team that they can push through adversity until. and there is a line where they kind of deflate. And it's interesting to me that they battle this when you have veterans that they have, you know, and so I think that that's something that Andrew Brunette needs to be working on. I think that's something in the locker room that they need to keep pushing through and keep working on. I think it's tough because I think there are young players that are struggling personally with their own games. And so I don't think there's maybe individual confidence with some of the younger players. I think the veterans have had to work really, really hard to find a way to get to their game, because the start was abysmal. And it's just almost like they don't have the resiliency yet. And the problem is the resiliency is, if it comes, it's going to come way too late. I mean, we're already almost halfway through the season. So it's very frustrating to watch a team that could be winning these games not winning these games. It's something that, again, Andrew Brunette, this team, they're going to have to address. They've got a couple days off. Again, don't play until Friday. Then they have a back-to-back against Vancouver and Calgary. This week, we're going to talk about maybe some takeaways from the first half of this year. We're going to be answering some questions. If you have a question, you can drop it in the comments on this YouTube video. You can also post your question to us on social media at LO_Predators. Is that right? LO_Predators. That's right, right? Okay, good.
Yeah,
just
you got
double
it.
checking. I got it. Nailed it. Before we sign off today, though, Emma, let everyone know where they can find you and your work.
You can find me at Emma_Lingen on Twitter and Instagram, and you can find my work at The Hockey News.
And you can find me on social media at AnnK_Mama on Ice. You can find my work with Penalty Box Radio as well. Friends, that is going to do it for this New Year's Day episode of the Locked On Predators podcast. We hope you all have a fantastic New Year's Day. We hope 2025 brings us all a little bit of peace and a whole heck of a lot of joy. It may not come via hockey, but let's try to find it in other areas of our life this year. We will be back tomorrow with an all new episode. We'll see you then.